keeping up time, we really are out of it. So let me just summarize very, very quickly a thing that we could talk about probably for another hour. The music in this last act of season 3 is like nothing previously heard on Battlestar Galactica. And it's worth noting that Ron Moore, by his own account, worried that its very familiarity was likely to be its great weakness. In conversation with the series' main composer, Aaron Crary, Moore articulated a kind of theory of cyclic time and multiple worlds as a kind of justification for using this. I think there are a number of things that we can actually take from this. One direction of exploration might be to consider the sort of persistence, the unexpected persistence, perhaps, of a kind of post-Christian temporality that comes from the show's origin in the 70s in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. If you know anything about Mormon theology, one of the things you know is that this kind of cyclic theory is actually fundamental to the way that the Latter-day Saints see the world. And I think that the requirement of this show, that there be this cyclic time, you hear repeatedly in the show, all the mantra, all of this has happened before, all of this will happen again, is, I think, sort of a sediment of that original process that is still really present. Another way we might consider this is to think about the presence of this intensely predetermined cyclic quality in the show that manifests in the music as well as in plot points as something between the persistence of and a nostalgia for a vision of cosmic order as a way of defining selfhood. I'm thinking particularly of the work of Charles Taylor, and sort of talking about the history of selfhood in the West particularly, and modernity, as contrasting a notion of sort of a disengaged self with the older investment in a self that is formed as a kind of adjunct to a kind of cosmic vision. This seems to me to be a show that's deeply invested in the notion of cosmic vision, but not necessarily as a good thing. In fact, this cosmic order that seems to be present, this plan that the Cylons may have or know about or be involved with, is not by any means a good thing, necessarily. The show has frequently been described as dark to sort of mark exactly this pessimistic, potentially catastrophic result that we don't really know how to answer yet. All reports about the last section of the last season suggest that it's not a cheerful thing, in fact. Another way to consider this question, particularly of the presence of all along the Watchtower, which has actually been covered dozens and dozens of times, is to think about it as a kind of commentary on the ontology of replication and copy, which is something that the show has been deeply preoccupied with all the way through its inception. Not only in considering the nature of Cylon identity, but also in this whole question of repetition and cyclic time. Two more things to say is, one is we might consider the question of whether this is actually all a meta-reflection on the condition of TV and our experience of it. In fact, since TV is a writer's and producer's medium, predestination is the norm in most television shows. It's simply that some shows will heighten this. They will actually make this part of the foreground instead of trying to construct the effect of contingency. And that would be a long conversation. And last but not least, I would certainly say that among all the things that it may be, I think that the presence of something like All Along the Watchtower testifies to the possibility of understanding the show as reflecting on layers of historical trauma that have sort of become sedimented into the present. That the show is concerned about 9/11 is not the end of it. The presence of All Along the Watchtower shows that the ghosts of Vietnam and the sort of problem of inhabiting a still God-haunted America seem to be sort of a constant thing to be worked out on television. With that, I should actually stop, and I thank you for all this time you've let me have, and I hope you like the segments. So, thanks. Can we just simply sort of converse casually?
Well, maybe if we could take just 2 or 3 questions, and then there's more wine and whatnot. If there are any, would anyone like to?
One of the things that I'm really curious about when we talk about when we talk about the music of a TV show like this is, to what extent is this really work for hire, as opposed to independent creative work on the part of the composer? you have any insights into the nature of the collaboration the producers of the show with the composer and what they're trying to achieve and what independent creative impetus the composer really could exert on it?
I can say a few things about that, actually. The composer is an interesting guy. He was a USC student who was actually one of Jerry Goldsmith's last students. So he sort of got this very distinguished film and TV lineage. He was brought on in the actual first season of the show. So he didn't actually have anything to do with the miniseries. He was the second composer involved. He takes up a lot of the material the first composer did, but it absolutely is work for hire, which of course before, about what, 1800 or so is the norm for musicians. Mozart worked for hire when he could, when he was lucky. So really, I think of this as in one way, a kind of return to the norm for musicians, rather than anything sort of unusual. As far as creative input goes, McCreary has a lot of space to decide things for particular cues. It is interesting, he has a website. It's a really good website. It's completely worth looking at, in fact. There are some things that happen in the course of working on the show that, I don't know, they're very suggestive. He didn't originally plan for the show to be especially leitmotivic, and it got that way. I think because it's actually a really good way of sort of condensing and telegraphing information. Most of the cues of that nature he developed himself. I'm actually finding this hard to answer because I can't do a lot without actually talking a lot about the way that he's deeply enmeshed in the really complicated economy of sound in Los Angeles. And just a couple of examples of this. So he's trained as a film and TV composer, sort of like really impeccable credentials in that. He also is not only involved in sort of writing a lot of different shows. He does Galactica, he does the Sarah Connor Chronicles, he does Eureka, he's done a couple other things I think as well. He also on the side has a rock and roll band where he plays with a couple of former members of Boingo Boingo, the most famous member of Boingo Boingo, of course, being Danny Elfman. So it's just this incredibly intricate network of social relations that underwrite this activity and make me not sure how to answer the question.
Well, maybe I can help you by giving you context of what prompts this. There was just a little while ago, there was a really fascinating segment on NPR with, and I wish I'd written down the guy's name, a composer who actually does themes for the network.